I talk about fairies on the internet a lot, mainly Disney fairies, but I can get down with other fairies. And one popular fairy series is the Rainbow Magic franchise. It's a children's book series that started in 2003 and is still running. So they have over 300 books and also an anime. Rainbow Magic is a British children's book series. I assumed it was American. That's one of my flaws as an American, is assuming everything is from here. And the books were originally published by Orchard Books, which is an imprint of Hachette, which is one of the big 5 publishers. It was published by Scholastic in the US, and as of recently, it's being published by Silver Dolphin Books. Silver Dolphin Books has a TikTok account. They have less followers than I do, which was exciting because I just hit 2,000. Go follow me on TikTok. And they've made some very cute Rainbow Magic themed TikToks. There's one that I like where all the employees dress as different rainbow fairies and like trick or treat in the office. So it seems like the brand is in good hands. The books are published under the author name Daisy Meadows. I phrase it that way because Daisy Meadows is not a person, it is a pseudonym. Around a dozen authors have written Rainbow Magic books under the name Daisy Meadows. I actually realized this just a few years ago. My mom and my brother and I were at the public library. Big fan. And my brother, he's autistic and he likes to look at the children's DVDs and he looks at the front and then the spine and then the back and then he opens it and then he puts it back and then he goes to the next one. And so my mom and I will take him to the library, we'll sit and hang out and he will look at the DVDs. And we were sitting in the aisle that had the Rainbow Magic books and my mom was like, Daisy Meadows can't be her real name, right? So we Googled it and found out that it is a collective pseudonym. This practice is not that uncommon for children's books. It makes it more straightforward to have all of the books under the same author name. It's easier for readers to remember, like, oh, those are the Rainbow Magic books by Daisy Meadows, as opposed to the Rainbow Magic books by these 12 people. And then it's also for organizational purposes, like library cataloging. In libraries, it's considered the default to organize alphabetically by the author's last name, even within a series. Individual libraries might have their own rules for this and keep series together, but in case they don't, it's nice to have all of a series under the same author name, so it's guaranteed to stay together on the shelf. Some examples of multiple authors writing under a pseudonym for children's books include Erin Hunter for the Warrior Cat series, Carolyn Keene for the Nancy Drew series, and Franklin W. Dixon for the Hardy Boys series. So Daisy Meadows is not a real person. And there was a TikTok going around back in September that like, beloved children's author Daisy Meadows has died. And like, babe, she was never alive. The creator of that video was using a photo of some random other author who was like, I am not Daisy Meadows and I am also not dead.
Good morning. This is Daisy Meadows out on a morning walk, as you can see, standing in the woods. Just to say that I am alive and well, not as being reported on TikTok and other places, having been age 40 and I've died of cancer. I am alive and well, as is every other author who writes for Daisy Meadows for the Rainbow Fairy series, so that's cleared that up.
And I remember the creator turned off comments and turned off stitches and duets because they didn't want people calling out the fact that this was a lie. And then at some point they deleted the video because I can't find it anymore. But just so we all know, Daisy Meadows is not dead, she is immortal. The most prolific authors in the Rainbow Magic series are Rachel Elliott, Narinder Dhami, and Sue Morgrandine. And you can actually tell which authors wrote which books because on the inside of the book, when it says special thanks, it's thanking the actual author. The original artist for Rainbow Magic is Georgie Ripper. She illustrated all the early books, and then I don't know if the publisher replaced her or if she wanted to leave, but then at a certain point, the books are illustrated by artists emulating her style. The cover of each book is a full color illustration, and then inside the book there are black and white illustrations of what is happening in the story. The art style is very cute. Everyone looks like they shop at Justice. I tried to do a fairy outfit today, but I feel like I ended up more 2014 Tumblr Music Festival. I try my best for these things, you know? The first books in the franchise and the namesake of the series are the Rainbow Fairies books. So the Rainbow Magic franchise of books is comprised of a bunch of smaller series of books that each follow a theme. So for example, 7 books that follow the Rainbow Fairies. The first book is Ruby the Red Fairy, and the book starts out with us meeting two human girls. Their names are Kirsty and Rachel. It kind of doesn't matter which one's which. They're pretty interchangeable. And they meet on holiday, because, it's British. They are each with their families taking a ferry to Rainspell Island. And they immediately bond and get along. They're very imaginative and into fantasy. And they start hanging out. And I'm sure their parents are thrilled. Now we can all chillax. Is that what British parents say? So there is a rainbow on Rainspell Island. And the girls decide to check the rainbow for a pot of gold. And surprisingly, there is a pot at the end of the rainbow. And they flip it over, and inside is not gold, but instead Ruby the Red Fairy. And she's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for saving me. I need your help. She explains that her and her sisters are the rainbow fairies, and their fairy job is to put the colors in fairyland. And her sisters are missing, which means that fairyland has lost its color. Then she shows them a flashback in a magical pond. I was unclear if the pond itself had magical properties or if that was just the most convenient pond and we're just using magic on this pond. But she shows them that there was a midsummer ball in Fairyland, hosted by King Oberon and Queen Titania, and the Rainbow Fairies were in charge of invitations. Then Jack Frost shows up. He is the villain for the franchise, and he's angry that he wasn't invited to the midsummer ball. So he casts a spell on the Rainbow Fairies to, vaguely banish them or something. And Queen Titania quickly modifies the spell to send the fairies to Rainspell Island in a pot so that they can be rescued. And Ruby's like, the spell was so powerful and the pot was going so fast that my sisters flew out of the pot and I was the only one left. So now they are scattered across Rainspell Island. So Kirsty and Rachel are going to search the island to find the other fairies. But first, Ruby takes them to Fairyland so that they can meet the king and queen. And to do so, Ruby shrinks them down into fairies, and they fly together to Fairyland. The king and queen are very happy that Kirsty and Rachel are going to help, and they give them silver magical bags that are filled with tools to help us later. But we can't look in the bags until we need them. And the king and queen's parting advice is to not look too hard for fairies, and the magic will find them. That's the end of book 1. Then we get Amber the Orange Fairy. Kirsty and Rachel are enjoying their holiday. They're trying not to look too hard for fairies, but of course they really want to find them. But then they stumble across this huge clamshell, and they can hear a voice inside, which is Amber the Orange Fairy. They aren't able to pry the shell open, so they look in their magic bags and find a feather. And Amber's like, tickle the shell, and it will open up. That's what she said. And that works. So then we take Amber to the pot at the end of the rainbow, so she can reunite with Ruby. The girls can't go back to Fairyland until all of them are together. When Ruby took Kirsty and Rachel to Fairyland, Ruby was starting to fade away. So we need all of the girls together to overpower Jack Frost's magic. That's why they aren't just hiding safely in Fairyland. Then we meet a talking frog named Bertram, who is one of the king's footmen who he sent to help them. Then Rachel and Kirsty shrink down to fairies so that they can look inside of the pot, because Ruby has decorated it, and we need to see that. Then we go to check on Fairyland in the magic pond, but the pond is frozen over, which means that Jack Frost's goblin henchmen are nearby. Jack Frost's goblins are going to try and prevent the fairies from returning to Fairyland. This is always kept as a vague threat. Like, how are the goblins going to prevent them from doing that? Are they going to kill them? We don't know. That's not really the vibe of this series, but that's what I interpret the threat to be. So the girls and the fairies hide, and we hear goblins bickering as they go past them. And then the coast is clear, so we all go back to the pot. But the pot has been frozen over. So Bertram the frog jumps on the ice until it breaks. Whatever, sure. So the fairies get back in the nicely decorated pot, and the girls leave. The next book is Saffron the Yellow Fairy. The US title for this book was Sunny the Yellow Fairy. I might be a little bit inconsistent with regional names, because the book I grew up with was Sunny the Yellow Fairy. But for the books I didn't read, I'm probably going to be like, whatever, sure. So Rachel and Kirsty are going on a walk, and a bee is chasing them. And we find out that this bee is actually from a hive of a beekeeper. I didn't write down the beekeeper's name, so I don't think it matters. And the beekeeper lets them try some honey, and the girls try it, and they're like, ooh, it tastes like fizzy. This must be fairy dust. Sunny the Yellow Fairy must be nearby. So they ask the beekeeper if they could go look at the hives, and so she supplies them with beekeeper hoods. And then one of the girls asks the beekeeper for a glass of water to kind of get her out of the way. I don't know if the beekeeper should be leaving these small children unattended with a bunch of beehives, but whatever. The girls open one of the hives and they find Sunny the yellow fairy. And Sunny has become friends with a bee named Queenie. Sunny is all covered in honey, so we wash her off in the bird bath. And then Sunny realizes that she left her wand back in the hive. And we look back and one of Jack Frost's goblins has the wand. But then all the bees chase the goblins away. Queenie, the bee, brings Sunny back her wand, but Queenie hurt her wing in the process of getting the wand and chasing the goblin or something. I don't know. So we take Sunny and Queenie to the pot at the end of the rainbow in the hopes that the fairies will be able to fix Queenie's wing. And the fairies are like, oh, we need a fairy needle. And so one of the girls pulls a fairy needle out of the magic bag. And we're able to sew up the bee's wing. And then the girls leave. Fern the green fairy. Rachel and Kirsty are having a picnic in a clearing with a big old tower, and they go and inspect the tower, and there's green fairy dust residue. So they follow the trail of fairy dust into some sort of hedge maze. I guess Rainspell Island has someone in charge of hedge maze upkeep. And they make it to the middle of the maze, and there's a tree with a hole in it, but the hole is covered in ice. And behind the sheet of ice, Fern is trapped in the tree. And so the girls put their hands on the ice to melt it. And they're able to release Fern, and then they warm Fern up with their breath. They breathe on her. But uh-oh, the goblins are back. And so the girls shrink down so they can hide with Fern under a leaf. Then they meet a friendly squirrel named Fluffy, and they give the squirrel an acorn, and then the squirrel gives them a ride out of the maze. But where the squirrel takes them out is not where they entered the maze, so they don't know where they are. And so they use the fairy bag, and we get a sparkler. And Fern is like, oh, we can set this off to let the other fairies know that we need help. I mean, it might also alert the goblins where we are, but that's a risk we're willing to take. And so we set off the sparkler, and immediately the goblins find them. But then the other fairies send a trail of fireflies to show them the way back to the pot. And a bunch of different cute animals help Fern and the girls get back to the pot. So just as a head count, at this point the pot has 4 fairies, Fluffy the squirrel, Bertram the frog, and Queenie the bee. And then the girls leave. We do a pace of 1 fairy a day, so they explore and find a fairy during the day, go back to the vacation homes at night, repeat the next day. Sky the blue fairy. The girls are on the beach, and then a crab tells them to follow him, and he leads them to a rock pool that's filled with fairy dust. So Sky was here. They find Sky trapped in a bubble on the surface of the water, but then the water freezes over, which means goblins are nearby. So Rachel or Kirsty, doesn't matter which one, runs back to get her fairy bag, and she pulls out a magical pebble that gets really hot. She gets back to the rock pool, and goblins are skating on the surface of the ice and taunting them. She throws the pebble at the ice, which melts it, and then the goblins run away. The girls are able to release Sky, but she's very weak from the goblins getting so close and getting so cold. Then the crab from earlier comes back, and he and his friends have brought a bunch of seagull feathers to sort of cocoon her and warm her up, which semi-works. And then the girls take Sky back to the pot, and the fairies do a spell to warm her up. Usually to do a spell, it takes all 7 of them, but we only have 4 of them, Ruby, Amber, Fern, and Sunny. So they attempt a spell, and it is successful. And then the girls go home. Inky the indigo fairy, or Izzy the indigo fairy. So I was a pretentious little child, and I like to say that indigo was my favorite color. I do really like indigo. I love all bluish purples. Periwinkle is also great. But I was more, I think, saying it because it made me sound smart. Indigo is not a color name that a lot of small children know. But what can I say? I love accuracy. I love specificity. I couldn't just say purple, because what if you thought I meant magenta? But Inky the indigo fairy is how I learned about the color indigo. And I was like, hell yeah, this rocks. So it's raining, and the girls are staying inside, and they pull a book of fairy tales off the shelf in the vacation home. And the cover of the book is a bluish purple color, and they're like, oh my god, is Inky in the book? So they flip open the book, and some of the pages are glowing. It's the pages of the Nutcracker story. And then the girls get sucked into the book. They arrive at the land of sweets, and they meet some candy elves. And there are things that have turned indigo that shouldn't be. So they're like, oh, well, clearly Inky has been here. They find Inky, and she apologizes to all the candy elves for making a indigo mess. And then the girls and Inky ask the elves, like, how do we leave? How do we get out of here? And the elves say to talk to the sugar plum fairy. So they're on their way to talk to the sugar plum fairy, and then goblins arrive. God damn it, not again. So Inky is captured by the goblins, but then the girls successfully distract the goblins with jelly beans. They're like, ooh, come and eat these delicious jelly beans. And the goblins don't trust each other enough to go one at a time to eat the jelly beans. They're like, if you go first, you're going to eat all of them. So they both run to get the jelly beans and thus set Inky free. Then the sugar plum fairy arrives, and she punishes the goblins by making them pick more jelly beans in the jelly bean fields. Then the girls and Inky go home in a hot air balloon. The balloon part is made of a bubblegum bubble, and it flies with magic. Heather the Violet Fairy. The girls are flying a kite, and then they notice a ribbon on the end of the kite that says, "Follow me." And the ribbon leads them to the merry-go-round at the Rainspell Island Summer Fair. And they notice that the pillar in the middle of the merry-go-round has an illustration on it, and Heather is in that illustration. So the girls check the magic bags, and they find a golden paintbrush, and they sort of paint the paintbrush over Heather, which releases her from the illustration. Then we go back to the pot to reunite all the fairies, but the pond freezes over. And they're like, it can't be the goblins because they're still in the land of sweets picking jelly beans. Which means, uh-oh, it's Jack Frost. There's a bit of a kerfuffle, but Heather traps Jack Frost in a magic bubble. But then Jack Frost starts to melt, and they all feel bad for him, despite what they've all been through. But also, they need Jack Frost to bring about winter. The implication being, we can't just let him melt to death, because then we won't have winter anymore. So instead, they put Jack Frost in a snow globe. They go back to Fairyland, and with all 7 fairies back in Fairyland, the color returns. Then we decide to release Jack Frost, because these books are for babies, so we have to impress upon them the importance of forgiveness, even though it seems more practical to, like, I don't know, imprison him or take away his magic or something. Because, like, by book 100 of him harassing these fairies, you're like, I don't think this is going to get any better. I think allowing Jack Frost to be on the loose is just, in the long run, feeding fairies to Jack Frost. Like that tweet where the guy kept getting shelter cats and they kept getting eaten by coyotes. And his coworker was like, well, by not changing the way you're handling this, you're essentially just feeding shelter cats to coyotes. Like the quote about how insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Like, oh wow, Jack Frost captured some fairies? Shocker. So then Kirsty and Rachel go home from Rainspell Island, and they are from different villages. Kirsty is from Weatherbury Village, and Rachel is from Tippington Town. But now they are best friends. So each subsequent series of books, Kirsty and Rachel get together for some arbitrary reason so that they can end up having to search for fairies. We do actually shift to Jack Frost stealing fairies' magical objects. The Rainbow Fairies didn't really have magical objects, they just had wands. But subsequent fairies have magical items that bring them their power. I'm now going to read to you the list of all of the different series in the Rainbow Magic franchise. First up after the Rainbow Fairies is the Weather Fairies, and as an example of magical items, their magical items are magic feathers. And at the end of the Weather Fairies series, Kirsty and Rachel receive magical lockets that are filled with fairy dust. So in all of the subsequent books, they have these necklaces that have magic in them, so they can transform into fairies or like use it to do magic stuff. Sort of like having the magic fairy bags. There's the Party Fairies and the Jewel Fairies. The Jewel Fairies represent aspects of fairy magic, not actual gemstones. So like Amy the Amethyst Fairy is in charge of disappearing magic. And until Amy gets her magical gemstone back, fairies won't be able to make things disappear. The Pet Keeper Fairies, they're in charge of keeping pets safe? Question mark? We're vague about this. Are like pets gonna die without these fairies? Like what does that mean? The Fun Day Fairies, who represent the days of the week. The Petal Fairies, the Dance Fairies, the Sporty Fairies, the Music Fairies, the Magical Animal Fairies. The Magical Animal Fairies represent different like positive characteristics a person can have. So Ashley the dragon fairy is in charge of imagination. The magical animals are a black cat, a firebird, a seahorse, a snow swan, a unicorn, and an ice bear. I would argue only some of those are magical. The green fairies, who are in charge of the environment. The ocean fairies, who represent ocean animals. The twilight fairies, who are in charge of various aspects of nighttime, like midnight snacks and the moon. One of those is more important than the other. The showtime fairies. The princess fairies. Here is a list of the princess fairies. The happy days fairy, the dressing up fairy, the cuddly creatures fairy, the adventure fairy, the sweet treats fairy, the playtime fairy, and the enchanted ball fairy. And I would argue that all of those, except for enchanted ball, are kind of unrelated to princesses. The pop star fairies, the fashion fairies, the sweet fairies, and this is an example of helper fairies, who are like subcategory fairies under a different fairy. So the sweet fairies are helpers of Honey the Sweet Fairy from the Party Fairies series. I feel like what happens is the publisher is like, wait, we can expand on that idea. Make some helper fairies. I'm not going to tell you every time fairies are helper fairies. I just want you to know that they exist. The baby animal rescue fairies. The magic crafts fairies. The school day fairies. And at this point, we shift from each series having 7 fairies to each series having 4 fairies, which I feel like is actually a weird choice, because I feel like it's harder to come up with the category versus coming up with a bunch of things within that category. So if you've committed to doing school days, you may as well do a bunch of school days. There must have been internal metrics of like, when a new series is released, there's a ton of hype and it does really well, and that sort of dwindles as it goes on. So they wanted to release new series more frequently, so they just made them shorter. That's the only thing I can think of. The Fairy Tale Fairies. This series had 4 fairies in the UK release, but an extra 3 fairies in the US release. But that's the only time that this happened. Without the Fairy Tale Fairies magic, characters from stories will be transported into the human world. So the fairies are in charge of keeping characters in their stories. The Helping Fairies. These are like first responder fairies. We have a doctor, a paramedic, a firefighter, and a lifeguard. Notice we don't have a police officer fairy. That's because why? Police officers don't help people, you're right. ACAB. The Storybook Fairies, which is a similar concept to the Fairy Tale Fairies, but this time the fairies are in charge of protecting the characters. The Friendship Fairies. The Baby Farm Animal Fairies. The Candyland Fairies, which this is the last series to be published in North America. Just to check in on the timeline, this was released in 2017, and the Rainbow Fairies were back in 2003. The Funfair Fairies. The Endangered Animal Fairies. The Discovery Fairies. These are girlies in STEM. The After School Sports Fairies. The Festival Fairies. This is about holidays in different religions, so we have Diwali, Hanukkah, Eid, and Buddha Day. The Gold Medal Games Fairies. The Puppy Care Fairies. The Birthday Party Fairies. And the Water Sports Fairies. Not that kind of water sports. So that's all the fairies, right? No, you idiot! There's tons more fairies! There's a bunch of one-off and holiday-themed fairies. These books are typically longer, and they are not part of a series, so they're just like an individual book. We have had a ton of Christmas fairies over the years. Holly the Christmas Fairy, Stella the Star Fairy, Paige the Pantomime Fairy, Chrissy the Wish Fairy, Cheryl the Christmas Tree Fairy, Natalie the Christmas Stocking Fairy, Angelica the Angel Fairy, Robin the Christmas Party Fairy, Giselle the Christmas Ballet Fairy, Elsa the Mistletoe Fairy, Christina the Winter Wonderland Fairy, Camilla the Christmas Present Fairy, and Connie the Christmas Cracker Fairy, and Connie is spelled with a K. Then we have some other random holidays. We have Trixie the Halloween Fairy, and Paula the Pumpkin Fairy, Juliet the Valentine Fairy, Emma the Easter Fairy, and Eliza the Easter Bunny Fairy, and Maria the Mother's Day Fairy. I'm not going to list off every one-off fairy, but I do want to mention a few that I personally find amusing. Luna the Loom Band Fairy. This is a fairy who represents the Rainbow Loom toy, And it says on the cover that you can win a loom band masterclass. Zainab, the squishy toy fairy. Jay, the boy band fairy, who is our first ever boy fairy. Felicia, the fidget toy fairy. Tamara, the tooth fairy. She was released in 2012, which means 9 years after the series started. They were like, I guess we'll have a tooth fairy, one of the famous categories of fairy. Leela and Mila, the twins fairies, not to be confused with Susie, the sister fairy. Evelyn, the mermacorn fairy, that's not a thing. Sasha, the slime fairy. Kimmy, the bubble tea fairy. And Nur, the vlogger fairy. I'd love to mention some of the pop culture references in these books. So sometimes a fairy will be a reference to something in pop culture. Lucy, the diamond fairy, is a reference to the song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Taylor, the talent show fairy, is a reference to Taylor Swift. Jessie, the lyric fairy, is a reference to Jessie J. I was explaining this to my mom, and she was like, who's Jessie J? And I was like, well, she was a British singer. She was more popular like 10 years ago. These pop culture references are going to have sort of a British angle to them because it's a British series. Adele, the singing coach fairy. Miley, the stylist fairy, could be Miley Cyrus. I'm not 100% convinced. And then I 100% would not have gotten this without the Rainbow Fairies wiki, which was an invaluable resource for this video. But within the Popstar Fairies series, there are 4 fairies who have names that are references to the British girl group The Saturdays. Vanessa, the dance step fairy, Rochelle, the star spotter fairy, Una, the concert fairy, and Frankie, the makeup fairy. Tyra, the dress designer fairy, is a reference to Tyra Banks. Greta, the earth fairy, is a reference to Greta Thunberg. Kat, the jungle fairy, is a reference to Katy Perry, specifically in the Eye of the Tiger music video. Yacinda, the peace fairy, is a reference to Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Zelda, the gamer fairy, is a reference to the Legend of Zelda video game franchise. And then we have our only official collab with an actual real person. Tiana the Toy Fairy, which is a reference to Tiana from the Toys and Me YouTube channel. Tiana also gets the only sequel book, In the Land of Sweets. These books came out in 2016 and 2017. Tiana from Toys and Me was a literal child. She's a British little girl, and the Toys and Me channel is very much that, like, kid content slop. Kids doing challenges and crazy aspirational stuff. So, like, driving a kid's car through the McDonald's drive-thru. Opening giant Christmas presents. Spending the night in a toy store. Slime. Toys. Orbeez. We don't have time to get into how I think filming your kids for content feels very exploitative. But whatever. The collab with Tiana. Sure. And then, because this is a British franchise, there's a ton of royal family fairies. Catherine the fashion princess fairy. Kate the royal wedding fairy. Elizabeth the jubilee fairy. Alexandra the royal baby fairy. Georgie the royal prince fairy. Francis the royal family fairy. Charlotte the baby princess fairy. Megan the wedding sparkle fairy. Charles the coronation fairy. Charles the coronation fairy is our second boy fairy. And he was originally going to be black, but then they changed him to be white with blonde hair. I think someone at the publishing company was like, it doesn't matter, he doesn't have to look like King Charles. And then someone else was like, no, he does. Or at least how King Charles would have looked as a little boy fairy. Sure. So because we've had like 300 books, that means we've had a lot of names. Sometimes the names are different in the different country editions, and as I was looking at the Wayback Machine, I saw that it looks like they would sometimes have polls on the website to name new fairies. When I was researching for this video, I found that a lot of girls were upset that as a kid they didn't have a fairy with their name. I didn't have that experience, mainly because as a kid I was really upset that Sarah was such a common name. So whenever I saw Sarah in something, I was annoyed. But of course, because Sarah is a common name, there are 2 Sarah fairies. Sarah spelled with an H is Sarah the Sunday Fairy, and then Sarah spelled without an H is Sarah the Party Games Fairy. Sarah the Party Games Fairy is a lot more recent of a book, and she is a fairy with a leg prosthetic. because as the series has gone on, we have dramatically increased the diversity and representation. The series started with, no diversity. Kirsty and Rachel are both white girls, and all of the rainbow fairies are white, except arguably Inky. I always headcanoned her as, East Asian. I don't know if that was intentional. But as the series has gone on since 2003, we've gotten way more diversity of all different kinds. So, racial diversity, obviously. Also, fairies with hijabs. We have Nur, the blogger fairy, and Alicia, the Eid fairy. Disability representation. We have 2 fairies in wheelchairs. Elsie, the engineer fairy, and Yasmin, the kayaking fairy. Sarah, the party games fairy, has a prosthetic leg. Lois, the balloon fairy, has vitiligo. And Harper, the confidence fairy, has Down syndrome. Then, in the 2023 book, Hope the Welcome Fairy, which was the 20th anniversary of the franchise, we meet 2 new human girls. Kirsty and Rachel get 2 new friends, Gracie Adebayo and Khadijah Khan. Gracie was born with a limb difference. She was born without a left hand, and she has 2 moms. Lesbians! Every time I get to put lesbians in a video, a fairy gets their wings. Sarah the lesbian fairy. Other random features of the books include the Jack Frost poem at the beginning of every book. There are also hidden words in the books. So you can unscramble the word in the book and then submit it to the publisher, and you could win different prizes. There have been variations of this over the years. Sometimes kids won merch, sometimes they got a character named after them, sometimes you just had to submit the word, sometimes you had to answer trivia questions. It was kind of hard to find information about these competitions. So let me know if you remember ever participating and how it went. There's also a reading challenge, so you win points for reading Rainbow Fairy books. There's, I guess, a page in the back of the book, and you cut out a medallion and add it to a poster, and you, climb up the ranks of fairy reader. It's cute. It's encouraging kids to read, but it's encouraging them to specifically read Rainbow Fairy books. Then we have the movie. Return to Rainspell Island was a straight-to-video movie released in 2010, and this was a British and Japanese co-production between Hit Entertainment and The Answer Studio. I feel like Hit Entertainment gets mentioned in every video of mine. It's that and lesbians. Return to Rainspell Island has anime-style animation, and it looks really good. It's very smooth and clean and detailed. It blends in some 3D elements, which don't look that bad considering it's 2010. The movie starts after the girls rescue Heather. The girls and the fairies reunite at the pot at the end of the rainbow. Rachel and Kirsty get turned into fairies, and they're going to go to Fairyland. But then, Jack Frost and his goblins show up. We get a fight sequence. Jack Frost and his goblins are fighting with ice and a crossbow that shoots nets. But the fairies are able to trap the goblins and Jack in a snow globe. I just called him Jack, like we're on a first name basis. So then the fairies and Rachel and Kirsty and the snow globe go to Fairyland. They return all the colors to Fairyland, and this is set to an original pop song about rainbow magic. And then Rachel and Kirsty get their magical lockets. I think in this movie they call them amulets. Then we cut to 3 months later. Kirsty is visiting Rachel in her town. Rachel is the blonde one, and Kirsty has black hair. For some reason, I feel like Kirsty should be the blonde one, maybe because I'm thinking of Kirsten from American Girl Doll. In this movie, it does matter which girl is which is why I'm telling you. The girls are talking to each other about how they haven't seen any fairies, and the popular girl bullies overhear them. Popular girl bullies is kind of a basic kids movie concept, but I was actually kind of pleased with it, because I was like, yeah, girls, you can't just talk about your search for fairies out in the open. All of the girls are wearing comically big belts, which is how you know they're evil. The leader girl is named Lydia, and then she has her, 3 bully henchmen, kind of like Jack Frost and his goblins. The bullies come over and talk to Kirsty and pretend to have met fairies before to get Kirsty to admit that she believes in fairies. Remember, this is Rachel's town, so Kirsty doesn't know these girls and she doesn't know that they're bullies. And then the bullies make fun of Rachel and Kirsty for believing in fairies, and Rachel is very embarrassed. Back in Fairyland, Oberon releasing Jack Frost and the goblins. The goblins are like comic relief goblins, a lot of slapstick, and Jack Frost is very whiny. But Jack Frost has a new evil plan. He has his goblins making snowmen, and he's going to turn them into a snowman army. And he sends the goblins to the human world to get carrots for the snowmen's noses. He sends them to the human world because he doesn't want King Oberon to catch on to what they're doing. Meanwhile, back in the human world, Rachel's mom says that the nature guide troupe that she is in charge of and that Rachel is in is going to have a summer jamboree on Rainspell Island. Kirsty is also going to come. I don't think she's a part of the troupe because she's from a different town, but I don't know. But Rachel is upset because Lydia and her bullies are in the nature troupe, so they're going to be there. Then Rachel and Kirsty kind of have a fight. Rachel hides her amulet in a drawer and tells Kirsty that they need to be more careful. Kirsty's like, we should just ignore them. And Rachel's like, you're not the one who has to go to school with them. This whole subplot reads very coming out to me. Kirsty thinks they should be open about their rainbow magic, but Rachel is ashamed and wants to keep it a secret. Then we get a montage set to an original pop ballad. Rachel is sad, but then Kirsty brings her amulet, and then they fly together as fairies.
And we can fly to change the world to a better place.
And the argument is, I guess, tabled for now. The nature group takes a ferry to Rainspell Island, and there's a giant rainbow that's like permanently on the island. As the ferry gets closer to the island, Kirsty's amulet starts glowing with rainbow magic. But Rachel left her amulet in her bag. Then Lydia comes over and makes fun of them, like, oh, is that a nightlight? Which doesn't super make sense, because nightlights aren't typically necklaces, but whatever. Back in Fairyland, the rainbow fairies are playing together. This movie tried to give them all slightly more personality, but like there's 7 of them, and they don't really have enough screen time for that to be like super important. As they're playing, the goblins show up, and the fairies watch the goblins run across the rainbow to go to the human world. Ruby is going to follow them to see what they're up to, and the rest of them are going to stay in case if Jack Frost shows up. Back in the human world, Rachel and Kirsty are setting up their tent, and Kirsty is talking about how she's excited to check the pot at the end of the rainbow. And Rachel's looking around like, how about we move our tent over there, actually? Rachel's mom comes and checks on them and is like, why are you all the way over here? And Rachel lies that it's because Kirsty snores really loud. Then Rachel's mom mentions that a bunch of carrots and oranges have gone missing. Kirsty thinks that Rachel is embarrassed by her, so she walks off. And Rachel starts to follow her, and then they discover a trail of carrots. We realize that the goblins took the carrots and the oranges, and they plan to use them for the snowmen. They also stole a bike that's like an ice cream stand. The girls go to use the magic from their amulets, but Rachel left hers back in the tent. So the girls both get on the carousel, they're over by the carousel, and Kirsty uses her amulet to bring the horses to life. I say horses, but one of them is on a horse and one of them is on like a lion. They chase the goblins are throwing fruit at them. Then Rachel's lion gets distracted by the fruit and stops chasing the goblins. The goblins end up flying on the bike somehow, but then Kirsty's horse turns into a Pegasus, and now we're all flying. But then we smack right into Ruby, who was coming to check out the situation. So the goblins are able to get away and cross the rainbow into Fairyland. And Ruby's like, oh my god, I'm so glad that you guys are here to help with this suspicious goblin situation. But it's starting to be sunset, and so in the dark, the rainbow isn't going to be there. So Ruby's like, I have to leave before the rainbow disappears. We'll meet up in the morning. Meanwhile, in Fairyland, Jack Frost and the goblins make a snowman army. And then Jack Frost basically fires his goblins. He's like, I don't need you 3 nincompoops now that I have this snowman army. So the goblins' jobs have now been replaced by AI. Then Jack Frost gets a rap song for some reason.
I'm gonna be the king, they're gonna be my people. This is a cold world, I'll freeze them like an icicle and rule their world with ice. And make them all bow down.
The rhyme scheme is pretty weak. At some point we rhyme barracks with carrots. And then there's a part where he just says yum yum over and over again.
Like eating frozen fairies, they go crunch, crunch, crunch. Yum, crunch, yum, crunch, yum, yum, yum. Yum, 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 yum. Crunch, crunch, yummy, crunch, 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 yum.
He's the only one who gets a song. Like, we had the Rainbow Magic songs in the soundtrack, but Jack Frost is, like, singing. Back in the human world, the girls see fairies outside of their tent, and they go outside to check it out, but it's just the bullies making projections with flashlights. Lydia makes fun of the girls' amulets, but Rachel stands up to her. She's like, yeah, we believe in fairies, but that's better than making fun of people. Her amulet glows, and Lydia's bully henchmen seem very intrigued, but Lydia makes them leave. The next day, the nature troupe is having a sports day, and it's starting to get very cold out. While they're getting ready for the three-legged race, one of the bully henchmen admits to Kirsty and Rachel that she thinks she saw a fairy.
Well, look who it is. Team Fairy. I'd rather be Team Fairy than Team Loser.
In the three-legged race, Lydia and her partner cheat and start early. Then she trips Kirsty and Rachel, and then two of her minions are about to cross the finish line and win third place, but she yells at them to make them wait so that she can win third place. Rachel and Kirsty are like, this is actually kind of pathetic at this point. And then they notice that the rainbow is missing red, blue, and indigo. Then we cut to Fairyland and see that Ruby, Izzy, and Sky are frozen in blocks of ice, and so are King Oberon and Queen Titania. So there was some kind of big battle with Jack Frost and his snowmen and the fairies. But Jack Frost won. The snowman army is all messed up, like they're missing limbs and stuff. And the goblins try and fix the snowmen because they think that that will make Jack Frost happy. And Jack Frost says that he's just going to destroy the messed up ones and make new ones. And one of the snowmen hears this and is not pleased about it. Then Jack Frost freezes the rainbow, and so the four other rainbow fairies who are in the pot are now frozen as well. And we learn that Jack Frost plans to take over the human world now that he's conquered the fairy world. The goblins run across the frozen rainbow. I think they're planning to get the other rainbow fairies to impress Jack Frost. But Rachel and Kirsty are there, and they pelt the goblins with snowballs. Meanwhile, the fairy has been frozen. The fairy as in boat, not fairy as in flying magical creature. The boat that they need to get home has been frozen in the harbor because it's now so cold. It's like snowing. And Lydia is super annoying and complaining about it. And Rachel's mom is like, listen, I'm pretty prepared, but I could not have prepared for a snowstorm in summer. Then we go back to Fairyland, where the snowmen are staging an uprising. They can talk now, and they're like, we don't have to take orders from you, Jack Frost. So they combine into one massive snowman. Jack Frost is going to use his wand to undo the snowman spell, but it turns out that the goblins took his wand to try and get the fairies back from the human world. So meanwhile, in the human world, the goblins are fighting over Jack Frost's wand, and the girls are able to trick the goblins. They're like, oh, haven't you heard of sharing? You should just break the wand into 3 pieces, which breaks the wand, and now it doesn't work. So the goblins leave. The girls use their magic necklaces to release the fairies from the frozen pot, and all of them fly to Fairyland together, where they are confronted with a massive evil snowman. Kirsty makes herself big again so that she could use her body heat to thaw the frozen fairies. We do some fighting, it's unsuccessful, and then we have a new plan. We lure the giant snowman onto the frozen rainbow bridge. Kirsty thaws out the remaining rainbow fairies and the king and queen, and then all of the fairies together use their magic to cast a spell to thaw the bridge. And then the giant snowman is disintegrated by the magic of the rainbow or whatever. Then we get a final montage where everything thaws. Jack Frost seems to apologize to his goblins. Everyone is able to get on the ferry and sail back home. And on the voyage home, Lydia gives her friends the ribbon from the three-legged race. Like, you guys deserve this. I shouldn't have been so mean to you. And we get sort of the implication that we're all on good terms now. The end. The other Rainbow Magic production was a live stage show. It was called Rainbow Magic Live: Saving Fairyland. This was an hour-long musical that ran from 2014 to 2016 and was produced by the Panto Company. This stage show has not been very well preserved. There is a 4-minute video on YouTube that is a bunch of clips from a recording of the show.
Rainbow Magic's fun today!
I found a couple pieces of advertising material and a very blurry short clip on Facebook. This show includes Jack Frost and the goblins, the fairies, but seemingly not all of the fairies. I believe it was a very limited cast, and so everyone was playing multiple roles. And of course, Kirsty and Rachel. It seems cute. I mean, at this point, I always assume that there's a live show for whatever I'm talking about. So I just search, like, Rainbow Fairies live show. If you went to this show, please share everything you remember, because this is basically lost media now. Speaking of stuff that's been lost to time, the website. There was, I think, multiple websites. There was Rainbow Fairies Online and the Scholastic website and whatever. There was multiple. But one of the websites had a home screen that was a scrolling scene of Fairyland, and then multiple flash games. Fairyland Rescue, where you click on goblins as they pop up. Magical Flight, where you fly as the Rainbow Fairies and avoid obstacles. You can switch between fairies as you run out of energy, so they're basically like multiple lives. This game is boring. A game that is not boring is Hide and Seek, which is, I think, too hard. It is a hidden object game where various jewels have been stolen from the king and queen's objects. So you have to find the jewels in the scene and then drag the jewel to the exact spot on the object, because all of the jewels are different shapes. And the hitboxes on these jewels are way too small. And then Jack Frost can come in and blow all of your progress away, so you have to click on him to send him away. There's also decoy gems that are covered in ice, and if you put one of those in the object, then when you finish, it's going to make you find a replacement. Also, you're being timed. This game was for small children. I found it difficult. Possibly part of it was I was playing it on the Wayback Machine and like the aspect ratio was maybe small. I don't know. But I felt embarrassed. There was also a create your own fairy game where you could customize a fairy. And I was underwhelmed by the amount of options you had. I was expecting like one of those pit crews where there's just like 1,000 clothing options and hair options. That was not the vibe. I was disappointed. Speaking of games, there were also some toys. You know I love dolls, so I had to see if there were dolls. And there were plush dolls that had like yarn hair and fabric bodies. They're not exactly my style, but they are very cute. And there was also a paper doll kit. This was designed by Casey Sanborn. I say this because she has images of it in her portfolio, which is how I know about it. And this kit came with paper dolls, clothes to put on them, a Fairyland play scene, and stickers and activities. I think this is so cool. I love it so much. Did anyone have this? Do you still have this? Do you have pictures of this? I love paper play sets. I have my whole collection of like pop-up book play sets. And this is spiritually very similar. Anyway, I hope this was fun. Your last challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to get me turned into a rainbow magic fairy. Silver Dolphin Books, are you listening? I know you've used the name Sarah twice. We could reuse the name Sarah, or we could use Seraph, even though that is not a human name. I'm thinking Seraph the graphic design fairy, and her magical item is like a drawing tablet. We could also do Sarah the doll fairy. You've done toys, but I don't think you've done dolls. The other thing I'm into is fairies, but I can't do Sarah the fairy. That's silly. I love pink. I'd save Sarah the pink fairy, but that just sounds like a bad OC. Very Mary Sue-ish, of like, she's the secret rainbow fairy that you didn't even know about, and her color is pink, and she's super magical and cool. Like, that's kind of lame. I don't know. Sarah the lesbian fairy? Probably not. We could do Sarah the pride fairy, and then it's like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Be like proud of who you are and your homosexuality. Or like Sarah the acceptance fairy. Sarah the equality fairy. You already have a vlogger fairy. I feel like Sarah the video essayist fairy is a little bit too niche. Sarah the nostalgia fairy, and she's in charge of making sure that people have positive memories. I don't know, we could workshop it. Hit me up. I know I'm not as big as Tiana from Toys and Me, but I got gumption. That's all I have for you today. If you liked this video, you can subscribe. I'm Sarah Seraph on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Tumblr. I've been posting a lot of casual short form content, so you should check that out. I also got a P.O. box, so if you want, you can send me things in the mail. Maybe that Rainbow Fairies paper doll kit, I don't know. Possibly art of me as a fairy. I don't know, you could do whatever you want. And as always, the sources I used are linked in a Google Doc in the description. And I don't know how to end a YouTube video. So, bye!